Where did God come from? When did we first start gathering around the fire and worshiping entities in the sky? Was it the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Neanderthals? In today's video, we are diving into the oldest religions in the world and which civilization may have kickstarted religion. Are you ready? Earliest religion ever discovered. Hundreds of religions have risen from the dust of ages, but what was the first one? Some 35,000 years ago, in the blackest corner of a Galilean cave in Judea, a group of early humans gathered round. It was dark, gloomy, and history was about to be made. They hadn't gathered to hunt or cook or gossip about who broke the flint blade again. They gathered to form the first known religion in the world. Did I mention how long ago this was? It was way before the biggest religions around today. These ancient humans entered a chamber marked by silence, darkness, and something carved into stone. A turtle shell engraving glowing in their torchlight. This was Manet's Cave, and what researchers recently found within it has flipped the script on everything we thought we knew about Paleolithic spirituality. Manet Cave is now the earliest known communal ritual site in the Levant, and maybe the oldest place of worship on the planet, period. Welcome to humanity's first church basement, or maybe temple? Forget incense and pews. The sacred space inside Manet Cave, tucked into Israel's western Galilee, was a dark, echoing cavern guarded by stalagmites like stone sentinels. Flint flakes, butchered bones, and hearth ashes were found near the entrance, all typical of primitive cave dwellings. But then, in the back, scientists found an altar. At least, it sure looks like an altar. In the rear of the cave is a massive dolomite boulder, placed like a prehistoric altar and carved with a tortoiseshell pattern. According to lead archaeologist Dr. Omri Barzilai and his team, the tortoiseshell pattern was symbolic, ceremonial, and deeply intentional. But the doctor still doesn't know what exactly it meant to the people who carved it. The prehistoric worshippers of the cave didn't exactly leave any scripture behind. Still, Dr. B isn't without his guesses. He suggested the engravings might have symbolized a totem, spiritual being, or mythological creature. Something beyond the physical, imagined, and revered. In the flickering firelight, it might have looked like it was alive. Did you just get goosebumps? The experts don't know how religion began in this cave, but it may have had something to do with sound. Professor Hershkovitz said the shape of the chamber amplified sound, which was perfect for chanting, singing, and storytelling. This wasn't just worship. This was a spiritual concert thousands and thousands of years before Woodstock. Someone, possibly some sort of prehistoric priest, would have brought people into the cave and used its intense acoustics to make their voice seem like the booming word of God, or the gods, or the spirits, or whatever they worshipped. It would have been an intense experience for everyone involved. Not far from the turtle altar, researchers found a complete deer antler tucked neatly in an adjacent chamber like some prehistoric sacred object. Why antlers? Because for Upper Paleolithic humans, deer antlers were tools, symbols, and maybe even spiritual relics. It's possible the first known religion centered on a deer god, or at least some creature with big antlers. This discovery is amazing because it shows that ritual behavior was evolving across the world 35,000 years ago. Small bands of humans from Europe to the Middle East suddenly started tuning in to the same spiritual frequency. But what sparked it? No matter how many turtle shell altars are found, scientists doubt they will ever truly understand what started religion back when people had hardly evolved speech. Gods, ghosts, and beer. Before the Bible, before the pyramids, and before Zeus hurled his first thunderbolt, there was Mesopotamia. It was a land where rivers raged, ziggurats reached for the sky, and humans were born with a very specific job. The Mesopotamians didn't just believe in their gods, they worked for them. To these ancient people, life itself was a divine partnership, and they were part of the cosmic maintenance crew. Everything from crops, disease, to having a bad day was connected to the gods. 30,000 years after humans gathered in a dark cave to do who knows what on a turtle shell altar, Mesopotamian religion was born. It is widely considered the first civilized religion in human history, because the first written scripture in human history was scrawled on cuneiform tablets. Let's dive into this epic world. In the beginning, there was only watery chaos, like a blender full of ocean. The Babylonian creation myth, known as the Enuma Elish, opens with two primal forces. Apsu, god of fresh water, got together with Tiamat, goddess of salt water, and together they birthed the gods. When their god children got a little older and grew too loud and annoying, Apsu tried to kill them. Classic god deity move there. Tiamat, horrified, warned their son Ea, god of wisdom, and Ea promptly took out Dad and turned his corpse into the earth itself. That was a twist. Tiamat, also upset that her husband was now part of the flooring, created a monster army to destroy the younger gods. In came Marduk, the divine storm jock who cut Tiamat in two and used her body to form the sky. Marduk then used the blood of her general Queen Gu to craft humans. It's all a little confusing, but you get the gist. And thus, the human race was born. But they weren't just going to lounge in paradise like in Christian religion. The gods instantly put their human creations to work. If they were going to live under the gods' roof, they were going to have to do some chores. In Mesopotamian culture, people believed that everything they did was work for the gods, from tilling the land to being a priest and lighting incense, which is why every aspect of their life was at least a little religious. If you lived in a Mesopotamian city, you lived in the shadow of the gods. Every city had a massive ziggurat, a tiered temple mountain with a shrine on top. It was like a skyscraper dedicated to one divine roommate. These temples weren't open to the public. Only priests were allowed in to tend to the gods' needs like ancient butlers. Every day, gods were bathed, dressed, perfumed, served beer, bread, fruit, and honey, and last but not least, serenaded by music and dancers. That sounds like a nice day. That's because it kind of was. Statues of the gods were believed to literally contain their spirits, so treating them right was a matter of cosmic survival. These statues were bathed like they were real people. I've got a question for you now. How many gods is too many? A dozen? 2 dozen? In Mesopotamia, the pantheon had over 3,600 deities. How are you even supposed to remember all of them? Luckily, they chose a few favorites to make things a little less stressful. There was Anu, the sky god, Enlil, god of wind and order, Enki, god of wisdom and mischief, Inanna, goddess of love and war, Marduk, the big boss, and Ninkasi, goddess of beer and booze in general. Each city had its patron god or goddess, and the city's identity revolved around that god. The god didn't just protect the people. They lived among them, housed in ornate temples, and received annual parades. Now, you might be curious about the afterlife. How did a culture so focused on caring for their gods fare after death? The Mesopotamian underworld was called Cornugia. It's described in ancient texts as a dreary, dusty pit with zero amenities. Not even a hot dog stand. There was no heaven for pure souls and no hell for the baddies. Just an eternal existence in the dark. Pretty bleak, right? Not to worry, there were lots of hauntings to keep things interesting. If you didn't bury your dead properly or forgot their offerings, you got ghosts. People built shrines in their homes and made daily sacrifices to Grandma's spirit to keep her from haunting them. But if they missed something and Grandma turned into a poltergeist, it wasn't the end of the world. They would just call a necromancer to exorcise the spirit. Mesopotamian religion endured for over 3,000 years. From the Uruk period, circa 4100 BC, through the Islamic conquest of 651 AD. It was only when Islam arrived that the old gods lost their homes. Their statues were abandoned, their temples fell, and their epic stories faded onto clay tablets buried beneath time. Mesopotamian religion wasn't just about gods. It was about responsibility, balance, and keeping the universe from falling apart. All without the promise of heaven or the threat of hell. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Zanbud and Rick Brock. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. The wild legacy of the Druids. Long before Hogwarts and way before Stonehenge became a summer solstice selfie hotspot, the ancient British Isles had their own mystical elite. the Druids. They were seers, scientists, warriors, philosophers, and party planners for the gods. Also, according to one ancient tale, they could magically prevent you from peeing, so don't mess with a Druid. Welcome to the weird, wonderful world of Druidism, an ancient religion woven into the mists of prehistory, where stars told secrets and warriors wore red robes and smashed skulls in the name of sacred order. Let's get one thing straight right off the bat. Druids weren't your average beardy forest folks waving incense at squirrels. These were high-ranking members of Celtic society, equal parts priest, judge, doctor, astronomer, and sometimes, if the mood struck, full-on magical threat. For example, a druid named Figol once cursed his enemies by threatening to seal their bladder shut. No swords needed here, just extreme urinary vengeance. All that being said, what you see of the Druids in pop culture today is still fairly accurate. The word itself comes from a Celtic word that means oak tree. In Celtic tradition, the oak tree was a symbol of knowledge and endurance. Druids were nature-centric, tree-hugging scholars, just like Dungeons and Dragons keeps telling us. But Druidism wasn't just mystical mumbo-jumbo. It had its own cosmic corporate ladder. Check out the different stages of Druidism. There was the Archdruid, the top sage who wore gold robes and may have glowed with celestial wisdom. Then on the rung below were the priestly Druids, dressed in plain white robes. They were the ones who conducted rituals. Next were the sacrificers, dressed in robes the color of blood. They were the warriors, the killers, and the spiritual army of the Archdruid. The people under the sacrificers were the bards, dressed in blue. They were typically artists and poets. And last on the totem pole were the initiates, who wore robes of brown and did all the grunt work. Ancient traditions tell us it took 20 years to train as a druid, and they memorized everything. Druids didn't write down religious texts. They rarely wrote anything. Instead, all their secrets were passed on orally from one initiate to the next, which is probably why modern historians know so little about Druids. Little, but not nothing. I can tell you that the Druids believed in polytheism, revering gods and goddesses tied to natural forces like the sun, moon, rivers, trees, fertility, death, you get it. They also believed in reincarnation, where sins from a past life could be repaid in the next. Life wasn't linear, it was circular, an endless loop of life and rebirth. What's the first place that comes to mind when you think of a Druid? Maybe Stonehenge, right? You might imagine robed Druids summoning the sun at Stonehenge on the solstice. But is that image accurate? Absolutely not. Prepare to be shocked because Stonehenge predates Druidry by centuries. Built around 2500 BC, likely for astronomical or ritual purposes, Stonehenge's founders are a mystery. Druids didn't show up until after it was already built, and then they adopted it as their own holy site. They weren't its architects, but they definitely knew how to throw a solstice party. And then came their downfall. At whose hand? None other than the Romans. Julius Caesar wrote about them around 59 BC, calling them wise and powerful, but also prone to human sacrifice. To the Romans, Druids were too influential, too independent, and far too mystical for imperial comfort. By the 1st century AD, Emperor Tiberius banned Druidry, blaming them for wild rituals and rebellion. The decline was swift. Whether from Roman suppression, disease, or conversion to Christianity, Druidism faded into legend. Have you ever picked a Druid as your character of choice? The truth behind Egyptian religion. If you thought religion was just about sitting quietly in pews and whispering prayers, ancient Egypt would like a word. They were some of the most obsessive religious fanatics in history. They danced, they sacrificed, they held epic cat funerals, and they created lore so captivating that people are still amazed by it all. To get to the heart of Egyptian religion, you first need to understand the goddess Ma'at. She represented harmony, balance, and cosmic order. Egyptians believed the world started as watery chaos and the gods brought order. Sound familiar? That's because the Egyptian creation myth was a spitting image of the Mesopotamian myth. Some scholars suspect the two religions may have risen from the same older source, an even more ancient religion that no one's ever managed to find. As an ancient Egyptian, living in harmony meant keeping Ma'at intact, which meant balancing all things in life. Egyptians were taught to be fair and kind, lest they risk complete extinction. When you died in ancient Egypt, your heart was weighed against one of Ma'at's feathers. She was basically a giant bird. If your heart was heavier, that meant it was full of regret from evil acts. And that meant your heart was eaten by Amut, the half crocodile, half hippo, part lion creature I like to call the soul snacker. But if your heart was light, you were allowed to go to the field of reeds. It was paradise, where beer flowed endlessly and you could chill forever with your favorite humans and your pets. In Egypt, heaven included your cat. I won't get into the entire pantheon because you've likely heard it before. Heka, the god of magic, Ra, the sun god, Osiris, lord of the dead, Isis, queen of magic, Horus, son of Osiris and Isis, Sekhmet, goddess of destruction, and then later goddess of love. The list goes on and on with about 2,000 names. Godly roll call would have us here for hours. So instead, let's talk about where these gods came from. Historians believe Egyptian religion got its start in prehistory, during the pre-dynastic period prior to the first dynasty kicking off in 3100 BC. Humans in Egypt started burying animals. Scholars believe that Egyptian religion started with an animal obsession. You might relate to this. Slowly, people along the Nile began associating the animals they saw with gods. Each region of Egypt had its own animal deity, and as time went on, they grew more popular. After some centuries, the community shared their gods, creating what would become the vast pantheon of over 2,000 zoomorphic entities. So basically, the ancient Egyptians lived in a universe pulsing with magic, music, and meaning. Their gods weren't distant figures living in the clouds. They were neighbors and mentors and guides for living a good life. Religion wasn't a Sunday-only thing. It was a lifelong cosmic contract, renewed with every sunrise, every breath, and every bowl of sacred brew. If you could pick one animal to turn into a god, which would it be? And dinosaurs are allowed. China's first recorded religion. Name one god from China. Go ahead, I'll wait. You probably can't, can you? Even a lot of Chinese people can't name ancient gods. Chinese religion is as old as Egyptian religion, but it's shrouded in so much more mystery. The Shang dynasty was the first recorded civilization in China in the 18th century BC. The best place to start when talking about the Shang dynasty is with Fu Hao, a very powerful queen like Wonder Woman and Cleopatra smushed into one person. She was the wife of King Wu Ting, and unlike most queens who were expected to smile politely and stay near the teapot, Fu Hao rolled up her sleeves and took charge of a 10,000-strong army. She became the first woman ever recorded in Chinese written history. The first woman ever, period. In all Chinese written texts, there isn't a woman who existed before Fu Hao. That's how important she was. Fu Hao didn't just crack the glass ceiling, she crushed it with an axe. Her tomb, found in the 1970s and left untouched by ancient looters, somehow by a miracle, was a treasure chest on steroids. Inside were 468 bronze items, 775 pieces of jade, tons of ivory, weapons, and even her pet dogs. As for the average Shang citizen, they farmed millet, rice, wheat, and barley. They domesticated pigs and oxen and sheep and even silkworms. They built homes near rivers and got serious about irrigation because flooding wasn't just annoying, it was deadly. Shang society had a strict social pyramid. At the top was the king, then his military buddies, followed by priests, merchants, and finally the farmers who did all of the hard work. The farmers prayed to the gods. Shang religion was a combo of animism, shamanism, and divination, along with the worship of dead ancestors. Whereas in Egypt and Mesopotamia, people focused on helping the dead get to their final destination, in Shang China, people venerated their ancestors just as much, and sometimes even more, than the gods themselves. No one was chummier with the gods or their ancestors than royalty. The Shang kings and queens considered themselves divine rulers, placed on the throne by Shangdi himself. Shangdi was considered the ultimate supreme being, the god of gods, the Zeus of Olympus, if you will. When they needed to make a decision about something, like, say, increasing taxes, they conferred with Shangdi, and they also conferred with their ancestors. The whole ancestor advice thing wasn't strictly for royalty. Everyone did it. Now let's say you're having relationship problems. Maybe you go on Reddit and ask strangers for advice. Or maybe you call your mom and ask her. In Shang China, people asked their ancient ancestors. They used oracle bones to ask their long-dead relatives what they should do about what's-his-face or who's-his-name sneaking around at all hours of the night with that woman from across the village. But all dynasties burn out eventually, and the Shang went out with drama. The last king, Shang Chao, was a tyrant with a flair for torture and a gift for making enemies. With barbarians knocking at the gates and rebellion brewing at home, Shang Chao was overthrown in 1111 BC by Wu Wang, the rebel who would go on to start the Zhao dynasty. Dynasties change, but not religions. These days, it's still normal in China to respect, venerate, remember, and offer sacrifices to those who came before you. Do you like the idea of worshiping gods or ancient family members more? Let me know in the comments. The mystical religion of the Minoans. If you want a spectacle, I'll give you a spectacle. High atop a craggy mountain peak on the island of Crete, with winds howling like spirits with a gossip problem, ancient figures once danced and prayed. The religion of ancient Minoa was part mystery cult, part Cirque du Soleil, and completely bonkers, in the best way possible. Okay, the Minoans. What a massive topic to dig my teeth into. They were a mighty Bronze Age civilization who lived on the island of Crete in the Mediterranean Sea, in what is now Greece from about 3000 to 1450 BC. They were also the people who inspired the myth of the Minotaur. Get it? Minotaur, Mino as in Minos, the founder of Minoa, and Taur as in Taurus, the bull. The Minoans were heavy on spectacle in their religion, but unlike the Greeks who came after, the Minoans didn't leave behind nice, tidy religious texts or a handy list of gods. Instead, they left frescoes, figurines, and a whole lot of questions. Trying to recreate their religion is like trying to piece together someone's life story using only their old Instagram posts. What the experts know for sure is that Minoan religion was polytheistic, meaning they had oodles of gods. But because they didn't write that list down, the names of all of their gods are a mystery. And most mysterious of all is a female deity known only as the Great Goddess. She was everywhere. Depictions of this mystery girl boss deity have been found all over the island. There are random images of her wrangling snakes and standing atop mountains. She was as dramatic as they come. But again, without detailed texts, she's a total enigma. And there are other nameless goddesses too. Most Minoan gods appear to be women, which has led scholars to believe that Minoan society may have had more gender equality than your average ancient patriarchy, or modern one for that matter. Religion in Minoa was heavily politicized. Archaeologists have unearthed the ruins of grand palaces like Knossos and Phaistos, which doubled as administrative HQs and religious hubs. Think IRS meets Hogwarts. What went on in these bureaucratic temple palaces? Something. I mean, obviously something, but without a time machine, experts are stumped. The Minoans also loved their sanctuaries. Nearly every mountain peak on the island has the ruin of a temple on it. And then there are the cave sanctuaries, dark, womb-like spaces that are both spooky and sacred. But again, without text, the rituals held in these dank caves is a total mystery. So now let's talk about the fun part, bull leaping. A ritual so metal it makes running with the bulls look like a kindergarten field trip to a sheep petting zoo. Depicted in the frescoes, this old ritual involved grabbing a bull by the horns and flipping over its back in what looks like a death wish mixed with gymnastics. No one really knows what the ritual meant, but theories range from fertility rites to symbolizing the triumph of humans over chaos. Or maybe it was just the Minoan version of trying to impress your crush with a backflip. Either way, bulls were very sacred to the Minoans. They show up in statues, symbols, and libation vases shaped like their heads. And there's the whole Minotaur and the labyrinth too. Minoans looked at bulls and thought, worship now, steak later. But why? What was it about bulls that captivated them so much to take such a central role in their lives? And they weren't the only ones. The Egyptians worshipped the Apis bulls. The cult of Mithras in Rome loved sacrificing them, and so did the Canaanites. Bulls were shown all over the ancient world, from the Mediterranean all the way to the east. Let me know if you'd like to hear more about this. The saga of Hinduism. Once upon a time, a dazzling, chaotic fusion of beliefs, rituals, and holy hymns was simmering across the Indian subcontinent. It was ancient, it was massive, it had no founder, no single book, and no customer support hotline. And yet somehow it evolved into one of the most powerful and enduring religions in human history, Hinduism. Unlike Buddhism, Hinduism wasn't founded. No one prophet came down from the mountain with commandments etched in stone. Instead, Hinduism unfolded like the ultimate collaborative playlist. Western scholars call it a synthesis, a word that basically means we have no idea how this happened, but it's definitely epic. Between 500 BC and 300 AD, Hinduism crystallized after mixing Vedic ritualism brought to you by Indo-Aryans with native Harappan traditions and spiritual ideas from independent seekers called Shramanas. Confused yet? Me too, don't worry. To understand where this all began, let's talk about the Vedas. The Vedas were like the ancient world's cosmic cheat codes. Written between 1500 and 500 BC in Vedic Sanskrit, these texts are older than democracy, espresso machines, and most of your favorite conspiracy theories. There are 4 Vedas. The Rig Veda is full of mythology and praise poems. The Sama Veda is a collection of musical hymns for rituals. The Yajur Veda has instructions for sacrifices, and the Atharva Veda contains powerful spells for everything from cursing your enemies to migraines. And we know all this because they left all these texts behind. If only all ancient cultures had been so savvy. The Rig Veda is the big guy in the lot. It has 1,028 hymns packed with gods, fire, rain, and the occasional existential crisis. The main gods include Agni, the fire god, Indra, the war god, Surya, the sun god, and Vayu, the wind god. And of course, don't forget Prithivi, the goddess of earth. The original Vedic religion of almost 4,000 years ago was all about fire rituals and bull sacrifices. They must have been hanging out with the Minoans. But then came the Upanishads, a new series of texts that introduced moksha, liberation from the endless cycle of birth and rebirth. The Upanishads were less about pleasing the gods and more about decoding the universe and finding your place within it. And this was when Hinduism began to evolve rapidly, especially during the Gupta Empire of 320 to 550 AD. The first stone and cave temples appeared, dedicated to new and exciting deities like Shiva, Vishnu, and Devi. But Hinduism didn't stay one neat system. It went regional, diversified like a spiritual buffet, and began adopting gods from local cults, along with ideas from Buddhism and Jainism. It also locked in the caste system, one of the worst things to happen to humans since the mosquito. The caste system, still in use today, reorganized society into a hierarchy with the rich and powerful at the top being closest to the gods, and the poor were at the very bottom. It gave the rich an excuse to treat those less fortunate than them as their actual slaves. And then came Islam. From 1200 to 1750, Hinduism fought to stay relevant. Muslim rule, especially under the Delhi Sultanate and the early Mughals, brought periods of persecution, temple destruction, and cultural suppression. The Mughals treated Hindus the same as the Romans treated Christians in the 1st century. Emperor Akbar showed up on the scene in the 16th century. Just like how Roman Emperor Constantine freed the Christians, Akbar ended religious persecution against the Hindus. Not even the British Raj, in power from 1858 to 1947, could end Hinduism. Despite British attempts to Christianize India during the colonial occupation, Hinduism held firm. And today, it's still growing. With over 1 billion followers, it is the 3rd largest religion in the world, behind Christianity and Islam. In India, 80% of the population identifies as Hindu. Nepal and Bangladesh also boast massive Hindu communities, and Hindu temples stand tall from Bali to Boston. And now you know how it all began. And just remember that Hinduism has been around for over 4,000 years. The world's oldest religious artifact. Deep inside a frozen German cave, an Ice Age artist carved a creature that no one had ever seen before. It was a lion walking upright like a human. Or maybe it was a human with the head of a lion. Either way, it was a vision of something utterly imaginative. It may have been the first god ever. It's even older than the ritual turtle found in the Israeli cave that I told you about at the beginning of this video. Scientists call the carving the Lion Man. It's the oldest confirmed symbol of religious belief ever dug up. Discovered in 1939 in the Hollenstein Citadel cave in Germany, this 12-inch tall statue was carved from mammoth tusk 40,000 years ago. It blends human and animal in one dramatic, mystifying figure, which archaeologists call a therianthrope. That's a fancy word for a mythical, part human, part animal being. How long could it possibly take to carve a little idol? According to a study by the British Museum, replicating the Lion Man with Stone Age tools like flint took 400 hours. That is weeks of work hunched in a cave in Ice Age Germany. The artists must have really liked what they were working on. But what does it all mean? How does anyone know the Lion Man is religious? Maybe it's just a toy. Researchers believe the Lion Man figurine was ceremonial, sacred, and shared, passed hand to hand like a relic or talisman. Wear patterns on the surface suggest it traveled through the community, meaning it wasn't just sitting on some prehistoric bookshelf. The cave itself, where this sculpture was found, was filled with other ritual clues. Things like perforated Arctic fox teeth and reindeer antlers, pretty much all objects connected to prehistoric religious activities. The Lion Man might be the first ever evidence that humans believed in beings beyond the natural world. A god, a spirit, a protector, or maybe something stranger. As Adam Brum, archaeologist at Griffith University, put it, this is evidence for the ability to imagine the existence of a supernatural being. And isn't that what separates us from the animals? Dogs don't have gods. Caterpillars aren't worshiping omnipotent beings. Humans are the only creatures on Earth who use their imaginations to think up things that don't exist within their immediate means of perception. You can't see it. And once humans cooked up gods, they never stopped believing in them. I have a bit of a surprise for you. The Lion Man has been hailed as humanity's oldest mythical creature/god for years. But recently, scientists working in Indonesia found evidence of a religion even older. The Lion Man is still the oldest three-dimensional representation of religious belief, but in Indonesia, there is cave art from 51,200 years ago showing a different therianthrope. It's another god, part animal, part human. This was the true beginning of religion. No one knows if it started in Indonesia, Africa, Germany, or at the bottom of the ocean. The evidence seems to point at one huge breakthrough in our ancient brains around 50,000 years ago that let us start cooking up religions. It was the invention of faith and belief. But why and how? What sparked this idea in the collective human consciousness so that gods cropped up in Australia, Asia, Africa, Europe? It's almost as if a real god whispered in our ancient ancestors' ears, "Believe in me and ye shall prosper." Which ancient religion do you find the most relatable? Let me know in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. See you tomorrow. Bye!